Hello, so we're focusing on our last group of chapters dealing with adolescents. And the first one is Chapter 13, Physical Development and Health in Adolescents. And this section focuses on information you need to complete your assignment number 4. So we're going to start out talking about brain development. So prominent brain changes in adolescence include the maturation of the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make decisions and decide about risks, refinement of the neural networks, development of the social brain, and developing the development of the limbic system, which is where our emotions are housed. And so here are some key areas of the brain in adolescence. The hypothalamus, the amygdala, which involves the limbic system. There's the prefrontal cortex, where we make decisions, the basal ganglia, which also involves emotions, and then the hippocampus. And there's, it indicates the limbic system and the parts of the brain that are involved there, and then the decision-making parts of the brain. So when we look at systems modeling, and particularly when it comes to brain development, there is a reward network that leads early adolescents to seek novelty, so looking for new things to do and try, and reward, and that might just be excitement or the novelty of it and intense stimulation. And that is working in conjunction with the executive control network, which is not working very well during adolescence. That has not completely developed yet. And executive control would allow an adolescent to assess how much risk they're taking and allow them, after they've weighed that risk, to control their impulses. And that takes quite a while to develop, maybe mid-20s or late 20s for males. And so here is just a chart of how that executive function and those reward networks work. And you can see there in the center is where the risk-taking tends to happen a lot. And that's part of why, for example, car insurance is much more expensive when you have an adolescent driver or a young adult. And so in regards to risk-taking, then let's talk about substance abuse. And this is moving from exploration of a substance to addiction or an addictive substance, such as alcohol, cigarettes, to overindulgence or dependency. And so when we talk about binge drinking, that's consumption of 5 or more drinks in a row. And so the risk factors for substance abuse are high in adolescence, and it can cause some of those developmental cascades that we've talked about previously, where taking the risks and outcomes kind of escalate that, and it can go in a very negative direction for adolescents. And so some ways we can prevent substance abuse would be to improve parent-child relationships so that parents are more aware of when children need support, increase parent involvement so that they control access and activities, help the children learn coping skills, and then reduce the social acceptability of substance abuse, making sure that adolescents understand long-term outcomes and health issues and how it will affect their later life, although that's something that it's very difficult for them to understand. But the more we talk about it and the more we offer them information about that, it'll make it easier for them eventually to get that. And so this chart talks about substance abuse and the different types of abuse. And red is 8th grade, blue is 10th grade, and orange is 12th grade. And you can see that in regards to marijuana and alcohol in 8th grade, they're used in equal amounts, but definitely not as much as in 10th or 12th grade. Definitely when it comes to alcohol, 12th grade, it goes all the way up to 40% of usage. And marijuana is used, although this is from 2014, and now that marijuana is more readily available for recreational use, this will probably change. Cigarettes goes up in 12th grade, and you could see that even though prescription narcotics and illicit drugs tend to go up, they're not used as much as marijuana, alcohol, and cigarettes. Now let's take a look at sleep. More than half of 15 to 17-year-olds sleep 7 hours or less each night, but they need 9 hours per night. And so when they're not getting enough sleep, this leads to reductions in their alertness, attentiveness, their ability to make decisions and problem solve and reason, that's executive functioning, and higher levels of reasoning. And adolescents who have poor sleep quality are more likely to be obese, to have poor emotional regulation, and to engage in risky behaviors such as substance abuse. Sorry. So one of the issues related to health and sleep is circadian rhythms or timing systems. And this is our brain's biological clock that regulates our need to sleep, and this is located in the hypothalamus. Homeostatic drive for sleep. This system keeps track of how many hours a person has been awake and creates increased pressure to fall asleep if that's been too long of a wake cycle. And so here, red is 7 hours or less, and you can see that it's 7 hours or less is the highest in 15 to 17-year-olds. 8 hours is blue, and our 12 to 14-year-olds get 8 hours of sleep more, and then 9 hours or more. Our 6 to 11-year-olds tend to get the amount of sleep they should, but as children get older, and particularly 15 to 17-year-olds don't get enough sleep, definitely, from this chart. And again, this is from 2014. So lastly, we're going to talk about dietary issues. So fewer than half of adolescents eat the recommended number of servings of fruits, vegetables, dairy products, and whole grains. And in adolescence, parents have a lot less control over what their child is eating. More than 2/3 exceed the recommendations for saturated fats, sugar, and salt. And so a poor diet increases the risk of obesity, heart disease, diabetes, and other long-term health problems. In 2012, more than 1/3 of adolescents were overweight or obese, and that's much higher now. And the recommendation is for 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous exercise every day. And so here, this gives us an idea of what children should be eating, or adolescents should be eating. So in the grains, adolescents should be eating 6 ounces per day, including at least 3 ounces of whole grains And you can see what would count as an ounce of grain would be a slice of bread, a half cup of pasta, and then vegetables. You have 2.5 cups per day, and that would be 1 cup of cooked vegetables or raw, a cup of 100% vegetable juice, or 2 cups of leafy salad greens. When it comes to fruits, 2 cups, 1 cup of raw or cooked fruit, a cup of juice or a half cup of dried fruit. Dairy would be 3 cups per day. That would be 1 cup of milk would be a 1 cup serving. It would be 1.5 ounces of cheese. And then protein, 5.5 ounces per day of protein. That would be 1 ounce of lean meat and 1 egg, 1 tablespoon of peanut butter, a 1/2 ounce of nuts or seeds, and sometimes that one gets well exceeded the amount that should be eaten, and a 1/4 cup of beans or peas, another one that we eat way too much of. And then lastly, oil, 6 teaspoons per day. So a teaspoon of canola, corn, olive, or soybean oil, 1.5 teaspoons of mayonnaise, 2 teaspoons of butter or margarine, or dressing. So what tends to happen in adolescent diet is they eat fast foods a lot. They drink sugar-sweetened beverages, including sports and energy drinks are full of sugar. They stay up late eating snacks and sitting around, and they have inadequate amounts of daily exercise. And so on the right are the recommendations: eating more foods at home with their family. If they have to eat out, choosing healthier foods. Remove soda and vending machines and change to low or 0-calorie drinks. Have healthy snacks at home and exercise earlier in the day to promote the need to sleep. And then participate in school physical activity programs, after school physical activity, and do things together as a family. There are also eating disorders, and anorexia nervosa is a disorder in which individuals restrict their eating and often become emaciated or extremely thin. But from their perspective, they believe they're overweight, and they deny the need to gain weight, and they also are very resistant to medical intervention or psychological intervention. And we used to think that this was more of an issue for females, but it's become more and more an issue for males. Bulimia nervosa is characterized by eating binges followed by guilt and shame and the use of laxatives or induced vomiting to prevent weight gain. And so the main problem here is the vomiting, which destroys the esophagus and the teeth, and the laxatives, as you might imagine, will mess up the digestive tract and the immune system. And then there's binge eating disorder, which involves recurrent eating binges and then feelings of shame, but there is no purging, and so generally the individual is overweight.